rev up your engines. Today I'm going to tell you what you should know about Subaru before you buy one. Scotty's not a big fan of Subaru, but I've got customers with them, and some of them are happy. So I'm going to show you what to look for if you're planning on buying a Subaru. As an example, this 4-year-old Outback, it's loaded, it's 4-door, fancy, high gas mileage setup on it. The partial zero emissions vehicle with symmetrical all-wheel drive. Now my customer owns this, had always bought Toyotas. Oh, he did a little research. He said, I hope you'll work on Subaru, Scotty, because I'm going to be getting the Subaru. In his case, it actually made sense. This thing is like $27,500 when it was new 4 years ago. If you were going to get the Toyota equivalent with all-wheel drive and everything, it was about $45,000. So yes, I can understand why he bought the Subaru. We're almost talking $20,000 less than an equivalent Toyota. Take a look, 4-year-old vehicle, and what's it got on it? 16,000 miles. So he's averaging like 4,000 miles a year. At that rate, maybe this thing will even outlast him. They generally don't have problems until they get to be higher mileage. Now as for the overall Subaru vehicles, generally they're not race cars. This is a relatively heavy vehicle. It's got a 4-cylinder boxer engine. It has been souped up. It puts out 175 horsepower, so it's fine for cruising around in. I personally advise people with these Subarus to stay away from the V6 engine. It puts out like 275 horsepower. They just have more problems as they age. That is basically a 6-cylinder boxer engine like a Porsche, and they have historical problems of head gaskets blowing, and the horsepower they put out a lot of times burns out the transmissions because they're relatively weak transmissions in these Subarus. But as with all Subarus except for their BRZ, it's got that fancy all-wheel drive system. If you really have to have a good all-wheel drive system, the Subarus make a good one. That's one of their big sales points. You live where it snows a lot, going mountains, going mud. That's where they get a lot of their sales from. Buffalo, where it snows a lot, Toronto. A lot of people like Subarus. For me, I live in downtown Houston, and the last time I checked, the nearest Subaru dealer is like 18 miles away. That shows you there aren't that many of them. Now, they did try a few decades back here in Houston. There were a lot more Subaru dealers, but a lot of them just went out of business. They aren't that popular here. But their intelligent all-wheel drive system, it does work good in the snow. I've rented them when I went to Lake Tahoe in the winter, and I've had them in the Rocky Mountains in the winter and in heavy rain, and they do handle quite well. You get a lot of safety if you got an all-wheel drive system. All 4 wheels driving, you're going to stick to the road better. Now, some of the older 4-cylinder boxer engines had valve spring problems. They had to rebuild the whole engines, and they botched up a bunch of them too, doing the repairs. This is a newer one. So far, it hasn't had any of those problems. I think they fixed that. But if you're thinking about buying a used Subaru, check out the history of that year's model. And if it's one that had the recall for the valve springs, stay away and don't even think about buying it. Whether it was repaired or not, I wouldn't touch those. Now, one of the biggest problems that I find with Subarus is, it's kind of a niche car maker. Man, their parts, replacement parts, can be super expensive, and often you can only get them at the Subaru dealer. As an example, whenever I do need parts, which isn't often, 24-year-old Celica, they're pretty readily available. And there's a big aftermarket, so I can get decent aftermarket parts at a good price. But Subarus, heck, I can get one that's 5-6 years old, find out, oh, that part's only available at the dealer, and it's going to be $350, where an equivalent part from my Toyota might be $80. Realize, although the price of the Subarus is much lower than the Toyotas when they're brand new, the parts are the other way around. The parts cost a lot more. And let's face it, with these boxer design engine, I mean, we're talking about dinosaur technology. It's still kind of a specialist thing fixing them. And it's often hard to find a good mechanic who knows how to work on a Subarus. So take that in consideration if you're the type of guy who's going to buy a car and drive it into the ground and going to have some repairs over time. If people can't fix them reliably and at a decent cost, you might think twice. But if you're like my customer and don't use them much, that might be an okay buy for you. Check out this. There's remnants of snails and acorns. Obviously, a squirrel has been living under here because he parks it a lot. I'll have to warn them about that. And if you really want to have an all-wheel drive vehicle that has a very good all-wheel drive system, Subaru's been perfecting that stuff for ages, it might not be a bad thing getting yourself a Subaru. This thing costs almost 20 grand less than an equivalent Toyota Highlander. That's a lot of money differential. And as far as I'm concerned, that's got to be one of the big reasons that Subaru sells a reasonable amount of their vehicles. In the United States, last year they sold over 600,000 vehicles. So if you're looking for something that's got a nice all-wheel drive system, isn't a race car by any stretch of the imagination, but you want transportation that's going to be reliable and not get you stuck in the snow or the mud or the ice, maybe a Subaru's for you. It's flat as can be here. The old ocean bottom. Doesn't snow maybe once every 5 or 6 years for a few minutes before it melts. I'll stick with two-wheel drive cars myself. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.